Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks everybody for joining. During the presentation, I've got everybody muted just so we don't have any feedback. If you have any questions, if you can post them into the chat, we will definitely try to address everything. I'm Nate Bondelit. I kind of helped put this together and just wanted to kind of go over the presentation before I have somebody else speak. So the topic of mind is really revolves around security and what has been going on in the education space recently. A lot more targeted security attacks have kind of been present, and out of that, we've built a relationship with Sophos and have been extremely happy from a technical perspective and a relationship perspective on the value proposition, what Sophos brings to the table. So what I wanted to do is introduce, there's two Sophos individuals, Eric Milton and Dan Russell. Dan Russell will be presenting today, and he will kind of demonstrate the Sophos strategy and present, I think, kind of a security event that's kind of recorded to demonstrate what, I don't know if it's a CryptoLock or what the bad software is going to try and do, but I wanted to thank everybody for joining. We're going to try and do some type of discussion once a month just to kind of present different ideas or talk about different methods, different school districts are doing to combat security related attacks. So thanks everybody. With that, I'll turn it over to Dan.
Awesome. Thanks, Nate. Audio check. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, you sound good, Dan, to me.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. As Nate mentioned, I'm Dan Russell, and on the phone with me is Eric Milton. Run through a quick agenda of what we're going to cover. So I'll just kind of go over our team real quick, introductions, and then we'll run through kind of threat landscape, global trends that we're seeing, talk about ransomware specifically in a couple different examples, and then we'll start to jump into how we look at security, not only from several different product standpoints and how to keep you secure against ransomware, but then we want to jump and take a bigger look at security and looking at that as a whole and as a system and working together. And as Nate mentioned, I've got a little demo that kind of shows our synchronized security in action against a ransomware attack. So should be fun. I'll try to get through it probably in the next half hour or so. And as Nate mentioned, if you have any questions, just put those in the chat, and then at the end we'll get through as many as we can and send out anything we don't get to. So with that, this is just wanted to introduce you to the Sophos team that is responsible for the Rockies area, which encompasses Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, and Colorado. And so we work directly with Nate and TekHut. So in the top right is myself, top left is Eric Milton. And then the bottom two, Justin and Natalie, are our teammates that actually work in the Vancouver office. Eric and I are in Denver, so we're kind of out and about usually, and then Justin and Natalie are always in the office. So always a good rule of thumb is that kind of bottom there, that Rockies@sophos.com alias. If you ever need to get a hold of any one of us, that's a good way to do it, as well as looping in the TekHut team. So with that, let's kind of jump into some global trends in the threat landscape and kind of how we're seeing things. So to kind of start off, is kind of a pretty eye-opening stat. So there was a survey done earlier this year that pulled about 5,100, I believe, organizations worldwide. And shockingly enough, 68% of those organizations fell victim to some sort of cyber attack this year. And when we look at that and break it down by industry, we can see that energy and oil and gas, they're high in all categories, which kind of makes you wonder if these attacks are maybe an early surveillance or pen testing for a bigger attack. But kind of where we're focused here, and especially today, is in the public sector, which is kind of that number 2 area from all sorts of everything from ransomware, credential theft, data breach. And here's kind of a look to kind of summarize cyber attack entry points and how they're coming in. So we've been hearing it for years, but email seems to still be the number 1 entry point into organizations. So that's going to be a phishing attack, some sort of email to get you to click on something in order for an adversary to get in. Right behind that's going to be web. So same sort of deal, trying to get you to click on links that redirect you to different sites. And then we have vulnerabilities in applications, and then, believe it or not, still USB and external devices. So that's kind of a quick snapshot of kind of the percentage of entry points that we're seeing. And so with all these attacks, it is a global problem, and you can kind of see the breakdown. And a lot of these, it kind of depends on when you take these statistics, because a good example is if anyone on the call is familiar with Emotet, that was a pretty vicious attack that we've been seeing late last year, a lot this year. That one was particularly targeted at Americas, Northern and Western Europe, and some other countries. WannaCry ransomware, on the other hand, was pretty targeted in Ukraine. So kind of different coordinated attacks worldwide, but even to bring it back home, I'm sure you've all heard several stories. I know we have of school districts and public sector getting ransomware attacks just right in our backyard in Idaho. So it's a global problem, but it also hits us at home here too. And so one of the reasons for that, that's quite interesting is when we look at all these attacks, people that had cyber breaches, 9 out of 10 were actually running up-to-date cybersecurity protections. And really the point there is traditional cybersecurity just cannot keep up. And we'll go through a little bit, I'm sure everyone's heard the term next gen, and yes, that is a marketing buzzword, but it also holds a lot of teeth, and there is some validity to that. And so we'll go through that a little bit. And so this kind of helps paint that picture of, if everybody has up-to-date antivirus, why isn't it doing anything? And so this statistic is it's staggering to me still, even though we present it all the time. But so at Sophos alone, and we have a massive global labs, every time zone, we have an office, and have a labs department that's looking for this bad stuff. And we team up with all the other companies in the industry to kind of get this threat intelligence. But just at Sophos, we see about 500,000 malware samples every single day. And what's interesting about that is those are all unique and unseen. And so when we look at why does traditional security not work anymore, of those 500,000, 75% only go to one organization. So what that means is the adversaries are creating malware, ransomware, some advanced attack. They're hitting an organization, and then they're morphing it just a little bit, and then go to the next one, go to the next one, and go to the next one. So it's different every time, because the way traditional antivirus works is it's basically a fingerprint. We have seen the sample before, we write a signature for it, we push that out, and you're protected. But as you can see here, we just aren't seeing that anymore. Those days of writing signatures are somewhat close to over, but yeah, hopefully that kind of paints that picture a little bit. So when we look specifically at ransomware, I wouldn't say it's becoming increasingly sophisticated. It really has been. We've been hearing it for years. It's just all of a sudden we're seeing it on the news more and bigger, it's actually taking down cities and counties. So if we look at how does a ransomware attack actually work? So really, most attacks are not necessarily simple, but they follow the same kind of chain of command. So basically an adversary is going to gain entry into the environment, whether it be through remote desktop, some sort of file sharing, something like that. And then they deploy malware such as Emotet, TrickBot, some of the names you might have heard, and then compromise even outsource IT providers for remote administration. So there's several different ways to gain entry. But once they're in, what they're going to do is try to escalate privileges until they're an administrator, and then try to shut down and disable and bypass software security so that they can move laterally and actually deploy what they want to do. And usually what they'll do is utilize network and host vulnerabilities or basic file sharing protocols to compromise as many systems on the network as possible and spread the ransomware. And then they leave the ransomware note and wait for the victim to contact them to see how they're going to get their money. So it seems simple, but most of them, and especially I'll go through a few examples, they're so sophisticated and coordinated, it's scary. This was pretty staggering. Everyone should have seen this in the invite that TekHut sent out, but we came across this article not too long ago, and it was pretty eye-opening. And when we look at K-12 specifically, and this particular article, there should have that link in your invite or down below, or we can resend it. But 500 U.S. schools were hit just this year alone, and that's looking at school districts. And I don't need to tell you guys, when we think of that could mean 3 buildings, an elementary, middle school, and high school, or that could mean 20 buildings, spread across the city. So anyway, quite staggering, and K-12 is becoming a target if it's not already. So let's look at a couple different examples of ransomware and kind of how they work, and that might kind of help paint the picture of really what we're talking about here. So one of the earliest forms of kind of this organized, or sometimes the industry calls it enterprise ransomware, was SamSam. And really what this did is in the last, let's call it 12 months, basically was able to secure about $6 million in revenue from the cyber criminals since its emergence. And that might be dating back a little bit more than a year. But really what that was done is it was targeting, medium to large organizations. And what we saw was actually the largest ransom was that was paid on that particular one was $64,000, which is a pretty significant amount of money. So while it's now considered to be dead, this particular one, SamSam kind of set the benchmark for successful, or what we're calling enterprise ransomware. And so here's a couple different examples, and I do agree that this picture is frightening in the middle. I'm not sure why the correlation there, but that one's
that's actually my Halloween costume. Yeah.
Oh, that's what it is. Okay.
Yeah. That's before I put the mask on.
Gotcha. Okay. Oh, so that's not actually you. Okay. But yeah, so that one in particular is Ryuk, and we'll talk more about that. But as you can see from some of these screen grabs, is Florida City is going to pay over $500,000 to ransomware. Megacortex. There was a recent example down in Texas. It just goes on, and we're starting to see more and more of that. So if we look a little bit deeper, so this particular one, Ryuk, this is one of the newer ones that we're starting to see a lot. So what it does is, it represents an evolution in targeted ransomware. So when it's run, basically what it's doing is dropping and executes a payload before covering its tracks and deleting itself. And then to maximize the damage it causes, the malware actually tries to shut down a long list of processes and services, primarily cybersecurity software, before it can start encrypting its files by excluding. And what it'll do is actually exclude different directories, such as browsers and operating systems, so that you can still pay your ransom. So it's pretty smart, I guess, if you want to call it that. Another one is Megacortex. Again, this is one that we actually saw at the beginning of this year, and a really, really bad one. So what this one does is, it's tailored, and each victim, really what it does is it tries to work in about a 3-hour window for execution. And it leverages both automated and manual components. So what I mean by that is a lot of that's automated to try to get a foothold into the environment. But once that happens, there's actually bad guys sitting there at the computer at the other end, and they're going to go in and try to navigate and do different things, and then obviously drop their payload and demand a ransom attack. And then last example, BitPaymer. So this is arguably one of the worst ones that we've seen, and some of the ransoms were actually in excess of $1 million per victim. So what's unique about it is its ability, again, to cover its tracks. So it's going to start off as just a regular executable, again, kind of by automated means, but then when it's running, the malware copies itself into not only one, but 2 alternative data streams where it can exist in a subcomponent of otherwise empty files. So then it basically just kind of spreads and launches and wreaks havoc within the organization, and you're left to hopefully restore from backup. But a lot of these will actually try to target backup systems first so that you have really no choice but to pay the ransom. So that's kind of all the scary stuff. Now, kind of want to shift gears and talk about, okay, it's not all doom and gloom. There are things we can actually do about it. So I kind of want to run through just some high level example, or kind of how we look at it real high level, and then we'll dive a little bit deeper here. So at a very high level, how are we going to stop ransomware? A quick example would be a firewall. InterceptX is what we call endpoint protection, and we'll go into kind of how we differentiate. And then a good one is, at the end of the day, we still have users and people that are clicking on things. So educating our users is still a very important aspect into kind of your overall cybersecurity plan. So yeah, XG Firewall, InterceptX, and PhishThreat is what we call our product for the end user phishing training and simulation. We'll go into a little bit more detail. And kind of one of the newer things, somewhat new to the market within the last couple of years, but you're starting to see a lot more of it, is, okay, it's one thing to put in a bunch of tools, but as these attacks get more and more sophisticated, we actually need humans to help augment the tools and do some threat hunting. So from our side, we call that managed threat response. And really at a high level, you can see it's a 24/7 threat hunting, detection, and response. So we'll get into slight more detail on that. But what I want to do is jump a little bit into InterceptX and how we're differentiated in the market against these sophisticated attacks. So you can see that's a pretty bold tagline: best endpoint protection in the market. What we are very excited about and pride ourselves is that's not our words. It's third-party validation. So just to kind of give you a couple examples, and these are some of the more reputable ones, but SE Labs, so this is just an example. So this is looking at total accuracy, for example, because it's one thing you can put in an endpoint product and lock it down as much as you can. Your end users are going to be really frustrated with a bunch of false positives. So accuracy is an important aspect of an endpoint product. But then when we look at, this is maybe one of our favorite just because NSS Labs is arguably one of the most reputable and kind of what people look at. But you can see we were rated #1 for security effectiveness and total cost of ownership. So really excited about that. And then when it comes to Gartner, I know a lot of people kind of rely on that. Now, Gartner isn't necessarily a full report card of security effectiveness and features and stuff, but it paints a pretty good picture of where you stand in the market. And what we're excited about is we've been a leader for 11 years, which no other company can say, for not only our endpoint product, but as well as our firewall. So let's, one more thing. So, and be happy to send this to you. We have, and I didn't even go through all of them, but this is, I think, pretty close to pretty much every kind of third-party report where they go in and basically rank, effectiveness and everything of endpoint. So this is kind of a list of all of them and links to them. So if you guys want a copy of that, we'd be happy to send that out. So let's shift gears a little bit and kind of talk about endpoint security. And so when you look at endpoint security, there's really at a high level 3 basic, or shouldn't say basic, core security capabilities you need to look at. So protection's obviously very important, but detection and response is one of those things that kind of gets a little bit overlooked, because sometimes, all of us are busy and we all don't have, 20-person security staffs looking at this stuff 24/7. So these 3 components are important, but what we find is the protection side is kind of where people look and stop, and the detection and response is a little bit of an afterthought. So when we look at the protection side, so InterceptX is what we call our endpoint product, and where I just went through kind of where we rank in the market with it. It's really because of those 3 pillars. So we have the foundational protection, and this is what a lot of these kind of startups or quote unquote next gen companies are lacking a little bit, is basically that foundational, basically eliminate the entry points type protection. So things from, signatures, which I'd mentioned above, are slipping a little bit in their effectiveness, but they're still relevant. Anytime we can, match a thumbprint, that's always best. But things like web control and device and application control and data loss prevention, they're still important functions of foundational protection, But really where we're seeing most of our detections globally is going to be in this middle section. So since being the theme that this is a ransomware webinar, I'll kind of start off by talking about our anti-ransomware piece and kind of how we're differentiated in the market. So the way it works, and this is going to be a little bit of what my demo shows, is it's looking for behavior of not only rapid file encryption, but full disk encryption as well. Some of the ransomwares we saw kind of late last year or 2018, we're just saying the heck with file encryption. We're going to encrypt the entire disk and hold it for ransom. So we have protection against both. But the way that works and kind of what's unique is, let's say ransomware comes in, someone clicks on something, it bypasses machine learning. There was no exploit technique. We didn't have a signature for it. It basically got past all levels of protection and starts encrypting files. So what's going to happen is 1, 2, 3, 4 files are going to get encrypted, and that our anti-ransomware piece, which we call CryptoGuard, is going to kick in, stop it, convict it. But here's the differentiator is while that happens, that 1, 2, 3, 4 file encryptions, we're actually keeping a cached copy of that locally on the machine. And so that when we stop it, convict it, and start the cleanup process, we're able to roll those files back to their pre-encrypted state for you during the cleanup. So that's a big differentiator in the market. There are a few competitors that say they do that, but a little trick they do is they actually just use volume shadow copy or VSS. And all the good ransomware, or pretty much all of it, that's the first thing they're going to encrypt, because otherwise the ransomware is useless if you could just go grab your files back. So we do not rely on that in the way we do it. So that's a big differentiator. But otherwise, and then kind of the third pillar is going to be that response piece. So advanced cleanup, so that you're not, having to be chasing viruses around and clean them up. Threat intelligence, and then the managed threat response piece, which is kind of a segue into this. So that third component, and what's becoming more and more important, is that MTR piece. And so what ours is a 24/7 threat hunting, detection, and response that's actually human sitting there 24 hours a day. And what is different about us is that second bullet is we don't just stop at notification, we actually take action. So if you've ever looked at managed services, you might have heard the term managed detection and response. That's a big buzzword, and there's a lot of vendors out there. But what they're looking at is they come in from the network side, and what they're able to do is they're like, oh, okay, I see something. And what they do is they send a list to you of here's steps A, B, and C to go do something about it. So what we're able to do is, since we're on the endpoint, basically our MTR is built off of Intercept. We're actually able to take action and neutralize on your behalf, which is a big competitive advantage for us. And so to kind of wrap that up, some things to consider, and I won't go through all these, but when you really sit down and think of it, here's a couple questions to think about: is how much does downtime cost you, and what would be that cost of a breach, whether it be insurance or downtime? What's your current security playbook for threat neutralization, or what percentage of current alerts go uninvestigated? Because that's another big problem with any security product, is alert fatigue. You get a bunch of alerts, and eventually you're just going to become numb to those. And so what we find is most of those just all of a sudden become uninvestigated. And so with that, how many team members do you have dedicated to that? And how would you currently deliver 24/7 threat investigation and threat neutralization? So just a couple of things to think about when we're looking at these products is tools are great, but we also need that investigation component as well. So with that, getting close to kind of wrapping up here, I kind of want to take a step back and talk about, we went through Intercept, we talked about Firewall a little bit and a couple different products, but I kind of want to take a step back and look at kind of how we look at it as a whole. And so if we start there, we've talked about Intercept, server protection, mobile device protection is important. There are especially Android threats. iOS has some vulnerabilities out there. We haven't quite seen malware running on iOS yet, but mobile protection and mobile device management is an important piece of security. Encryption, especially if you have traveling laptops. Web security, you saw that was pretty close to the #1 entry point, so that's a very important aspect. Not only web security, but web control as well for SIPA compliance. And then email protection, so that we look at that twofold, is protecting your email and trying to keep the junk out, and then as well as that end user training that I mentioned earlier. Wireless is, believe it or not, how we look at that as a component of network security. And so we do provide wireless access points that have a security spin on them, as in today's day and world, most everything is wireless. And then last but not least is going to be the firewall. And one important note of this, I didn't want to just go through and list a bunch of products. While they are, and it's cool that we have all these, there are a few differentiators for us. So one of them being what you see in the middle is Sophos Central. So that's our management platform, cloud-based web dashboard to manage all of these products. And at the top and bottom is going to be, if, you know, not necessarily prevalent, at least in today's age, is public cloud, but it will be, I think, as things kind of move more and more to the public cloud, and having that visibility and compliance around that's important. And we talked about managed threat response. So looking at all those, that's great. They're great products in and of themselves. But what I really want to do is talk about our idea of synchronized security. And basically what we did is we, about 5 years ago, created this notion of synchronized security where all these products should work together, share threat intelligence, and take action, automated action and response for you. And what's cool about that is we've been doing that for 5 years. And what we're watching is the market validating that strategy. If you look at all these different products out there, you know, good firewalls out there, I'll just say a few: Palo Alto, Fortinet, Checkpoint. What you're starting to see is them try to develop a really strong endpoint game or make acquisitions to get that, and to try to get that, you know, everything working as a system. So this is kind of a good way to look at it. In today's threat landscape, we really need to move from individual point products to, you know, endpoint, firewall, email, everything I just went through, working on their own, and really get them working together. So if you think of point products today, they're basically, you know, islands. They're not sharing information. They're working in isolation, bunch of different management consoles. And basically they're built separately to do separate things. So the way the market's shifting is security as a system, working together, sharing information and threat intelligence, centrally managed and compatible with each other. So really, this is the last slide, and then I'll kind of show you what I mean by synchronized security. So this is the example I want to show you in the demo. So this is just endpoint and firewall and what they can do together. Just as an example, it's kind of one of the easier ones to paint the picture of how that works. So these two products are always sharing intelligence back and forth, what we call as a security heartbeat. And so what does some of that information mean or look like, or what can it do? One of the things would be lateral movement protection, and this is what I want to show in the demo, is think of the idea of an endpoint over here. It has Intercept X on it. It gets ransomware. We're going to stop it, put it in a red unhealthy state, and start the cleanup process. So what that does is we communicate that to the firewall, and it says, hey, Dan's unhealthy, I'm cleaning up ransomware. What the firewall is able to do is tell the rest of the network, hey, Dan's unhealthy, don't talk to him. So we're able to basically isolate that machine, not only from itself, but from the rest of the network for two-way communication. Another benefit is synchronized application control. So if today you've ever looked at any firewall, including our own, without this concept of synchronized security, if you look at your traffic reports, you only see about 50 to 60% traffic visibility or classification. And the reason for that is a lot of things are encrypted now, or it's just flat out meant to be evasive, like BitTorrent. So what we're able to do is if traffic hits the firewall and we don't know what that traffic is, we're just going to query the endpoint and say, hey, endpoint, what was that? And it's going to report back like, oh, yeah, that was BitTorrent.exe, and here's the file path, and we'll classify it for you. So now when you look at your reports, you can see what's going on in your network to not only have visibility, but maybe take action against that as well. And then the last part's going to be synchronized user ID. So, getting user data and reporting is usually a challenging thing, but what we're able to do is with the combination of these is obviously the endpoint knows who's logged in. We're just communicating that to the firewall. So now we can give you user-based reporting or user-based policy. So with that, I'll just run through a little, I think it's about 3 minutes, and I'll kind of describe what's going on during the demo. I went through it pretty fast, so I might have to pause a couple times. But just to set the stage a little bit of what I've got going on here. So there's a machine on the left here, and basically I've got two different pings going. The ping on the left is pinging the machine on the right, and then this ping here is just pinging the internet. Over on the right-hand machine, I've got a ping going to the left machine, and then a ping out to the internet. And then here I've just got Intercept X open, showing that it's in a green, healthy state. In the background, I've got my firewall up, and really what I wanted to highlight is that security heartbeat. So you can see behind this firewall in my demo environment, I've got 5 connected systems. They're all in a green, healthy state. So I'll kick this off here. And so, yeah, as I described, the 2 different pings going on that side, the 2 different pings going on this side. And then what we're going to do here is actually launch, and sorry, I explained the firewall. But here's an example of an actual email. So this is experiencing, hey, something's happened with your credit report, gives you step-by-step instructions what to do, click on this file, enable editing, et cetera, et cetera. So, okay, yeah, I'm intrigued what happened to my credit report. So I'm going to follow the instructions. I'm going to click enable content. And right then and there, you can see it popped up quick, but there was a PowerShell script that ran, and now we've blocked ransomware. So what I wanted to show was the files that it was actually encrypting, but it didn't work. But so right away when we encrypt that, so you can see this machine on the right that was actually ran on. Let me actually pause this real quick here. So you can see our pings are timing out. I'm not able to ping that machine on the left, nor am I able to ping out to the internet. I'm completely isolated. And then on the left side, you can see that ping that's coming over to this right machine is all of a sudden timing out. But I'm able to go out to the internet on this one. So basically what we've done is that lateral movement protection. Machine on the right is completely isolated. Machine on the left just can't talk to it because it's in a red, unhealthy state. And so if we go back to the firewall, you can see now we went from 4 connected good to 1 at risk. And so just on the firewall, we can actually go in, click on that, and get a look and see which machine. Obviously, it was this break glass VM, which was the machine on the right, and it's going to give us a little bit of information on that. So the next part, you can see it's still going through its cleanup process. And while it's doing that, we'll jump, I think that's the next part of the demo. Oh, no, so what I did, okay, let me pause. So what I did is I fast forwarded and went through its cleanup process, and you can see the pop-up. I think it popped, I fast forwarded too much, but it said threats clean, no other threats found. So now what you can see is we're resuming our ping on the left, and now I'm able to ping the machine. Yeah, so ping's going to the right machine, ping's going to the left machine. My lab's a little bit goofy, so it takes a minute for the internet to kick back in, but okay, it looks like I'm back connected to the internet. And okay, now we're resolving our pings. So really the point there, and I went through that pretty quick, but hopefully that painted the picture of that all happened. That machine ran a ransomware executable. We caught it, stopped it, cleaned it up, isolated the machine. I didn't have to click anything for that to happen. That was all automated, which is really cool, because whether that happens while you're at lunch or you're done for the day or you're busy doing other things, that's the coolest part about this, is it's all automated and does that for you. And then the next part, what I want to show you is after that happens, we'll give you reporting to show you exactly what happened. So here I'm jumping into what we call the Threat Analysis Center and Central. And in the threat case that we generated for this attack, we basically break it into 4 sections. So this top one that I just highlighted, this was giving us the real simple view of it. So we can see this VM, well, in my case, it's a VM. The root cause of this attack was Outlook, which we saw in demo. The beacon event was PowerShell. That's basically where we caught it and detected it. And then we went through and cleaned it up. So the next section is going to be a little bit more informative. It's going to tell you what it was, how many files were impacted, which time did it run. We give you some steps. You can isolate the machine. But then down here, we'll give you the graphical breakdown from start to finish. So here we can see, I'll put a quick pause on it. We can see Outlook identified by that red dot, the beacon event. We can see that it someone from Outlook opened up a Microsoft Office document, in which case was called creditreport.doc. And then from there, a few bad things happened. We had some reach out to some IP addresses, some file reads. But if we look all the way over here, there's the blue dot where we caught it. That's where that PowerShell script ran. And so any one of these icons, we can actually click on them and get some more information. So I'll click on PowerShell here. It's going to give us a little bit more information. I can actually click to see what was actually run. In this case, we can see it's base 64 encoded, but we can just decode that and actually see what the actual command was that was run. And if we hide that out and then basically looking at what it did. So you can see here, this is where it actually tried to encrypt those files. And that's why I had that folder open. It just went too quick because that process, we convict and then roll those files back real quick. So I wasn't able to show that. But basically there was, in this case, it says eight excuse me, files that tried to get encrypted, but we were able to roll them back. So fast forward a little bit here. And then down at the bottom is just going to be a list view of that. So you can export that and kind of sort by it, basically all the processes, IP addresses that it reached out to. So yeah, with that, I think, yeah, that was pretty much the end of the demo. So hopefully that was informative, good. I'll kick it back to Nate and Eric and see if there's any questions or anything to add.
No, this is Nate. That was good. Do you guys, if anybody has any specific questions or how this would play into anything? I mean, there are a lot of different ways this could be looked at from a, internal perspective. Some school districts look at, protecting specifically server infrastructure and having Intercept X or even a managed implementation on their server infrastructure. Some people are worried about the client devices and only doing this for the client devices. I mean, there's a lot of different matches that could be presented from a cost perspective to make it fit wherever it needs to fit. The bottom line is, viruses and malware, kind of didn't used to be a problem, but with the fact that people are getting paid on it now, it is, and it definitely shows weakness in some of the customers or districts in the areas that had an event. Either were running older antivirus software or running something like the Microsoft, Windows Defender as a part of like System Center and their agreement or EES agreement. So it just puts light onto the fact that, it's probably pretty important to address certain security aspects. And this is a solution that we've been successful with and can kind of fit just about anybody's budget from a large school district to a really small school district. So if anybody has any questions, you can, bother me or Jared or Johnny or Abby. Or you can ask questions in the chat or, if nothing else, we appreciate everybody's time and hopefully, you got more out of it than you were expecting and would present it with a really easy way to deal with bad software. Anything else you want to add, Eric or Dan?
Thank you guys for hosting the webinar. We really appreciate you having us. And, obviously Dan and I are, we've worked at Sophos a long time and are great believers in what we're delivering. And the TekHut team, has seen that firsthand with some of their customers. But if you guys take nothing else from the webinar today, the education on the ransomware and the evolution that we've seen on the malware side of things, definitely work with your TekHut team and take a closer look at your level of protection. A lot of customers have had their antivirus for a long time and it's worked well. And that can lead to a false sense of security. So definitely look at, you definitely need to take very seriously looking at a solution that has these advanced capabilities to stop threats like ransomware based on their behavior, just because the signature approach that we've all had for so long is no longer capable. And so obviously we hope that you take a closer look at Sophos for that. But just in general, make sure you do an internal review. The TekHut team can help you if you want help, and make sure that you're well positioned for the threats that we've really seen turn their focus on K-12 in the last year. I would say more than I've ever seen in the past. And Dan and I have worked with K-12 for over 10 years. So thank you guys for hosting us. We really appreciate it. And I don't see any questions in the chat. So Dan, they let you off easy. I thought someone was going to put you on the spot, but.
I know, I like it. Well, and one thing I wanted to point out, because I can't remember if we said it at the beginning, I apologize if we did, but we were recording this, and the TekHut team will send it out to you and maybe probably post it somewhere. So if you want to send it to any colleagues or reference it again, we'll have that available to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nate. Thank you, TekHut team. And I guess, no questions. We'll conclude here. But you know where to find us if anything comes up later that you wanted to review or ask in more detail. Dan and I will make ourselves available if we can be helpful at all. Thanks, you guys.
Sarah.
And, have a great afternoon, Nate.
Thank you. You too.
Yep.